The Scene projects are brought to you by these fine sponsors: Cliff Avenue Upholstery and Restoration, Chevy Girl Advertising and Booking, Sunny Radio, and Sioux Falls Podcast.com. Welcome into a very exciting episode of The Scene. I'm your host, Bubba Starts, and with me today is writer Chris Larson. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, thanks. How you doing?
Good, man. Well, before we get too far into it, why don't you go ahead and kind of tell people who you are and what it is that you do?
Well, I guess my main job is I am a business owner in Sioux Falls. I started a company 30 years ago called Comfort King Mattress Factory. And we manufacture our own brand, and we're the longest running mattress brand in either of the Dakotas, because we're up in Fargo also. So to put it short and sweet, we build the world's best mattresses.
Love it. And in the last year or so, you've taken on another venture. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so for most of my adult life, pretty much all my adult life, I've been interested in politics, kind of like I was interested in sports. I like to watch it, and I like to watch the high level, the pros. I didn't really watch college or high school. I watched the pros. And so with politics, the analogy is the people at the top at the national level. And so there's a lot of ways you could be interested in that, the president, what they're up to, and the Congress and the senators, and everybody knows the names of the major players. But I pretty much ignored South Dakota politics, even though I've lived here and run a business here for 30 years. And I honestly, I kind of feel like the reason was I thought it was boring. And also figured, well, because I'm a Republican type of conservative person, especially in the last 10 years or whatever, we're good to go because we got all these Republicans that are running the state, and everyone says, wow, you live in a red state. And so you kind of assume that everything's kosher and don't need to check up on those people. But when, we all went through the COVID mania, I think a lot of our eyes were open to the real world and to how the way the world really works. I think that's the people I've met and gotten to know in the last couple of years, the fellow citizens I have in South Dakota and all over the country, but especially here, is we don't trust the government anymore. We don't trust any of our big institutions, like we did when I was growing up in the 80s and 70s and 90s. We kind of woke up and assumed that the adults were in charge of things, and what they said they were going to do is pretty much what they were going to do. And if we had to go to war with another country, for example, well, let's go, let's go Team America. But now I think a lot of us look at it a lot different. Like there's something else going on. And so for me, that meant I need to start taking a closer look at what's going on in South Dakota. And I started to get to know people on the grassroots level who were, getting involved in the school board elections and the county commission elections and at that level, so the city council, and it's not boring at all is what I learned. In fact, meeting new people and people who are for the first time in their life, really starting to want to have input in the government that wants to rule over us, and it's been an interesting year and a half, I'd say, that I've gotten to know so many people.
Now, we know that obviously all of the authoritarian, that attitude that kind of came down on us with COVID and all the lockdowns and all this crazy things that the governments were trying to do to us. Obviously that woke a lot of people up, but I mean, it was already pervasive, right? And I wonder if it's not a generational shift, right? You think back to I'm 38, so, born in the 80s, and like you said, the adults were in charge. That's just the way. There was already a thing, and it was running, and it's still the same people running it now that were running it then. And I think a lot of my generation, and maybe yours too, the Gen X, I mean, they say I'm a millennial, I guess, but it doesn't feel that way. I feel very disconnected to kids born in the 90s, right? My wife is 10 years younger than I am. the world she was raised in was completely different. So I feel more in line with my Gen X, right? People who were born in the 70s, right? Who are the tail end of the baby boomer generation, right? You're the younger sibling sometimes of, my dad was the youngest of five, seven kids, right? Five boys. And, his oldest brother was a hippie, right? He was in the 60s and on the beach, right? My dad's raised in the late 70s, right? Graduating high school in the 80s. So I wonder if it's that cultural shift to where there wasn't as many older people, right? It just like finally the country kind of like homogenized out to where all of us who have been working our asses off, right, every single day and feel like we're getting dominated by these people who are totally disconnected from the world that is actually being lived in.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that like the scales come off our eyes and things have been revealed to us that we didn't see before. Like the 9/11, we all kind of, I know when I was watching it from afar that I wanted to take revenge. I wanted my country to use the military to take revenge on whoever did it. And there were people on the opposite side of the political spectrum than me who were saying things like, hey, maybe the adventurism that we've been engaged in, that our country's been engaged in, what they call the global American empire, the gay, maybe all that stuff we've been doing over there is causing some blowback. And I would reject that as, hippie leftism. But now I look at it a little different and say, maybe they're right. I've become more like anti-war than I ever have in my life.
Well, and that combined with a completely corrupt military industrial complex. Yeah, no wonder we're in constant wars. I mean, I've never known a time besides the 4 years of President Trump's that we weren't in war with someone. Thankfully for me, being in high school at the time, a lot of my friends got sucked up into that second Gulf War, searching for weapons of mass destruction that never existed. Right. And I wasn't as patriotic as you in that. And I was questioning things then, probably, being someone who, used marijuana and kind of was on that hippie leftist side, right? That was going, I don't know that what I'm being told is the truth. Right. So I've always kind of been disconnected from that matrix. Right. So the way COVID and those things played out, it wasn't surprising to me. What was surprising is that it was as pervasive and there was as many people around me that weren't awake or didn't have the scales removed from their eyes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us have, everyone has their own journey story, and I hate to be judgmental to my fellow citizens because we were all just, floating in this chaos that our government and big corporations and big pharma was doing to us. So I forgive people for wearing masks so long, but I didn't really feel comfortable with them, for many, many months. Like in the beginning of May is when my family, we decided to take the masks off. And for our own health, that's we decided, based on our medical advice that we got from our doctors that we trust, they said that you don't need to do that. And so we didn't, but it was a kind of a lonely road. It's like when I traveled all across the country, and everywhere I went, every gas station I'd stop at, every restaurant I went into, like we were the only freaks who were being rebellious, and people would give us the evil eye, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to wear this mask when I walk into the restaurant and sit down, and you guys aren't wearing them now. So why do I need to do this humiliation ritual of wearing it to the seat?
Chris, it was crazy. That was just a few years ago. That was so short time ago. It's just wild, right? That we all lived through this, and we're, mostly a music podcast. So a lot of what I've heard from people, and a lot of our friends are in Minnesota, a lot of artists we talked to. Minneapolis had a totally different experience with COVID and then the George Floyd riots and everything than we did here. And talking to them, these people were terrified for 4 years. You know what I mean? Yeah. For 3 years living in absolute fear of everything, and they're just starting to come out of it now. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Your experience was so different than mine for that 3 years that I can't even relate to you.
Well, and, to get into the spiritual realm a little bit, I think, God kind of made us a certain way. And I'm a believer. And so I think people have a God-sized hole in their heart, and they got to fill it with some gigantic fear. And COVID really fit that nicely because we had after 9/11, everyone feared, terrorism, and that never really came about again. And so we had this vacuum that had to be filled. Like you're familiar with Michael Crichton, a
Oh yeah.
writer who wrote, yeah. So he wrote a book called The State of Fear, and it's probably my favorite Michael Crichton book. And he wrote all novels, but he was a doctor. He was like a medical doctor, and he was just the most interesting writer because he would write about a different little adventures, basically. And one of them, The State of Fear, was about the global warming at the time. We called it, now they call it climate change. Climate change, but the
We'll
global
just go
warming
back to
scare.
calling it the climate here soon. Don't worry.
Yeah, and so it's a great book because he lays out there, and he spoke about. They tried to cancel him, but he was too big, I guess, to cancel. But he wrote about how it's a religion that's like a cult religion for him, and people need to fear something. And so after the Cold War ended, that's where the climate fear started to take over for a lot of people. And I saw, like, during COVID, that the people who were most overcome with fear were and trusted the government. Okay, so if you would question, do you really think this makes sense? They would just say, well, the government said so. Who the hell are you to, contradict Fauci? Like, are you smarter than him? And so they put their trust in the government. But people who were believers, who were Christians, tended to be more skeptical of that. I remember, Kirk Cousins was the quarterback of the Vikings, and they busted him at the time and gave him a hard time for not taking the vaccine. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
He
Yep.
was one of the, unlike Aaron Rodgers, who pretended to take it, he actually came out and said, "I'm not taking it." And they were just shocked. They couldn't believe it. The reporters covering it, and he said, "I fear God more than I fear this. And if he wants to take me, then he'll take me." And it was just such a refreshing message,
Yeah,
because I had
that's
felt
a
that way.
powerful statement. That's a powerful
Yeah.
statement, and that's how we felt here at home. And not being, not big church goers. I've always been spiritual and tied to that, and I'm actually becoming probably more religious. Baptized, and there is that where it was just like I'm not afraid at all. Like, if I just go out and live my life and I'm not tuned in, for me, I could tell who watched TV and who was just living. Because if you just went out and lived your life during that time, besides all the masks, my life in South Dakota didn't change much. I still went to work every day. Besides some of the things, if you got a little sniffle or here and there, right? People would look at you differently, but I never stopped working. It didn't greatly affect our life. It was weird, right? It was an odd time, but I've never been more grateful to live in a small, rural community than I was during that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I live in Sioux Falls. It's a little different, but we actually made masks for the first 6 weeks when COVID struck, because,
Well, you would be very,
uh,
sewing machines are probably a big part of what you
right.
guys do, right? So that
Yeah.
makes
And
sense.
a friend of mine in Iowa started doing it because he's got a mattress factory, but he went and bought some fabric, and then he told me about it, and I was like, I got fabric here. I'm going to see what I can come up with. So I just kind of one morning, I spent about 2 or 3 hours, and I designed a mask that we could use our materials making. And we ended up, we'd make them and give them away. And we ended up, at the end of it, we ended up making about 20,000 and giving most of them away.
Holy
But
buckets.
then,
Well, you were trying to
yeah,
do the most good. I mean, at the time, we
it
thought
was
that
a
was what we
great,
needed.
it was a great experience, because we had little old ladies would come and get our fabric from us, and we would give them the template. They would cut them out at home, and they would bring them back to us already made with the elastic around them, and then we'd give them away. And so it was a really community thing. It really felt good, but I was kind of obsessed with it. My wife would tell you, I was obsessed with it for 6 weeks, and then customers decided they wanted to buy mattresses again, and so we just switched. But I traveled about 30,000 miles that first year of COVID, and which is weird. I'm not a traveling salesman. I had weddings, and I just did my normal life, and I didn't wear masks, anywhere, except if I had to go to on the plane, right? But I
Only
never
where
got COVID.
required.
Yeah, where they absolutely made me. In most stores, I wouldn't even go. I like Menards. I never went into for probably 3 years because of that. But we didn't get COVID until maybe a year and a half into it, and so wasn't a big deal, but I know some people did get it, and it was a big deal to them. I'm not trying to minimize it.
No, not at all. Well, and the biggest shame,
with,
and Chris, we're going to hit on it, and I don't care, I'm not making any money on YouTube anyway, and I don't care if it does, but at this point, we know that their experimental mRNA vaccine screwed a lot of people up. It killed people, blood clots, strokes. All the information is coming out now. It was the biggest crime against humanity that has ever been perpetuated on human beings. Right? And we need to keep calling it out for exactly what it was. Our government and the pharmaceutical industry tried to frickin' kill us, and they did kill a lot of us. And they all need to be held responsible for it. There needs to be accountability for it. And that's what the fight is about now, right? And I know that you really jumped into the political writing this summer. Obviously, getting President Trump in the White House was everything leading up to this, and why you have a collective sigh of relief on November 6th, at least to some portion, that at least we're not tumbling over the cliff. It's still a fight, yeah, but at least it's not too far gone. I mean, if they were able to cheat it again, then we're way too gone and it's over. It's over for everybody, right? Well,
and I think the big thing about 2020 is that we knew that some people on the left really hated Trump. Even some people on the right really did. And that he wasn't the most popular guy of all time. I didn't like the way he handled COVID with the vaccine and all that stuff. But most people I know do not believe that Biden actually received more votes. We've never believed that. And you can call me all the names.
This election proved it. Where are the 20 million extra votes? What are you guys talking about?
But the thing is, you can argue with people who disagree, and I think in this world you can live in a bubble and believe the craziest stuff. I've talked to plenty of people that do,
right?
And there's no convincing them.
It doesn't make it true to the rest of us,
right? So we just have to keep pushing for the one thing I've been really pushing for. That's kind of the thread through most of my writing, is that the accountability isn't there from our politicians. I reached out to Thune and Rounds and Kristi Noem and Dusty Johnson when these vax mandates started coming in, because even though I run a small business, it wasn't going to affect me. I don't have 100 employees, but friends of mine work at companies that do have more than 100 employees, and they were about to get forced vaxxed, and a lot of people actually did, because companies were feeling it coming, and their lawyers would tell them, we better go ahead and get ahead of this and do it now. And so I didn't get any response from these people that supposedly represent us.
Represent you and your business.
I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I've been working retail for 30 years. I respond to everybody that wants something or has a complaint or a question. We're open to the public 7 days a week. And that's what you call accountability. I call it the retail standard. And we should apply that to any government worker. They should answer to us. Not only do we pay their salaries, but they're pretending to represent us. But the reality is what the people are, we're the product. And they serve a higher master, which is the money, the guy with the money. And that's how they get ahead. So when you look at the elections in South Dakota, we had a lot of victories. The people of South Dakota defeated these ballot measures, which, the 4 of them that we covered. I was the chair of the No in November campaign, and we covered 4 ballot measures that we considered to be potentially catastrophic and definitely changing to our state, like changing the Constitution for 2 of them.
Yeah, I don't like that. As someone who wasn't political before this one, I was just I realize I'm very conservative. We don't have to go and changing our base document of the state. I don't like that.
Well, particularly if it's not a grassroots movement that the people of South Dakota brought up. It isn't. These are things that people outside the state that all have a profit motive, like the pipeline and the marijuana and the abortion and the Amendment H. They all have a profit motive behind them. And so the sales pitch that they give you is usually not the real reason. And so I'm skeptical of any big organization, any big company. I'm skeptical of the government. And I think we all should be. And so we saw, great victories in South Dakota with grassroots candidates actually taking over the state House and the Senate. And so we celebrate those victories, but at the same time, we look and say that the rhinos that represent our party, Kristi Noem and John Thune, for example, got rewarded for ignoring their constituents. And that's my biggest reason. I came up with a what I call the rhino blacklist. And it was an article I came up with a few weeks ago.
Well, and
And
we're gonna link that one in too, because that's kind of what led us to talking. I kind of got
okay,
introduced through the Patriot ripple effect and everything is kind of how I got introduced to your newsletter, and the Rhino Blacklist coming out at the same time that guys like Steve Bannon on the War Room and their talk. All of a sudden, South Dakota and John Thune becomes a real a national name, a guy who was hidden for 30 years in the Senate, or well, 20 years now in the Senate. I was in college when he was elected over Tom Daschle. And now I think it's great that he's going to get primaried in his own state the next time as the Senate Majority Leader and get deposed that way. Because that's what's going to happen. I don't think the state of South Dakota, we're done with this. And I think it's guys like me and you standing up and bringing awareness to that. Like, these people have done nothing for the state of South Dakota out there on that national stage. We need people who are going to fight for us out there instead of just like, well, it's the Republican. We need better primaried people. We need to get the rhinos out, and you're a big part of that.
Well, I'm just doing what I can, and I wrote this article and I came up with the rhino blacklist, and I got input on it because I don't know everything. I'm not even close to being an expert in South Dakota politics. I'm a newbie, but I tapped people that I trust who have been in this world for a while, and they helped me with some of the names on there that aren't really obvious or really well known. But the main criteria is that these people claim to be Republicans and they claim to be conservatives too, but they act against the party platform, they act against our ideals, and most importantly, they act against the Constitution of the United States of America. And so, we call ourselves patriots, but I actually wrote an article kind of differentiating between a patriot and patriotism. So patriotism is what you feel. It's an emotion that you'll feel like when you're at a football game and the Jets fly over and somebody sings the national anthem. It's beautiful. Or maybe on the 4th of July and you get some tingly feelings. That's patriotism. Being a patriot means you look at the world through what I call George Washington goggles. You see the way America should be, the way our founders saw it, and you can see the giant flaws, like how huge the federal government is in the swamp in D.C. It's way too much power. And by the way, I want to give credit to Mike Rounds. I think he's trying to get his name crossed off the blacklist because he came out yesterday. I don't know if you saw this, but he said he wants to he's proposing to eliminate the Department of Education, which is Trump's idea, but he's running with it. And I'm so shocked because he's such an establishment politician that never likes to be controversial in any way. And isn't that shocking
that anyone from South Dakota, a South Dakota senator, would even step out there, right? And for Rounds, he might alienate himself from Thune in that way as well. And it might be something that he's looking at as just like, Thune is putting himself on a path. Opposed to MAGA at this point is a problem for you, right? Like at this point, we know that you are it's not red and blue anymore. It's establishment and MAGA, or the Patriot right, or whatever you want to call that side of it. Those are really the two sides now. It's not a red and blue game anymore. And guys like Thune and guys that have flown under the radar and have he's literally been in there since I was 18 years old. He has been in there, and I looked up his record, and there is not a damn thing that he has done besides get some parades approved or a visit approved for the Jackrabbits to come and visit because they're national champions, right? Like that's all he's done. It's ridiculous.
How do they stay in power that long? How do they?
Because there's no one to primary against him. If he's got all the money to go against it, it's very easy to buy all the media in South Dakota and be like, oh, well, he's the only guy to choose, right?
Well, that's why we have to be on guard with the next governor race because Dusty wants it. He wants it bad.
Oh yeah, is that his next play?
Yeah, he's got a war chest, and I don't think Senate. So the scuttlebutt that I'm hearing is that Dusty wants to be governor, and he's got the money to do it, and he's plugged into the system, and so it's going to be a battle because I think we need to have a governor that'll actually listen to us and respond to us. And my experience with Dusty just isn't even personal. Like I did meet him recently, and I was not impressed. I mean, he looked right through me. He looked up at me because he's a little man, but they don't respond. He's not. I
He's a
would talk to
typical
other people.
politician.
They don't know who he is. He's not involved with the people on the ground in South Dakota. Like if you're a Republican and you're representing other Republicans, you should be at some of these county meetings. You should be involved. You should, you should be rubbing elbows and getting to know. And I didn't see that from the governor either. She seemed like a ghost everywhere I went. I would ask, have you gotten any support? None of those people supported like what we were doing to fight these ballot measures. And it's like, do they only care about federal issues? Like they represent this state. They should love this state. I think if you live in South Dakota, you probably love it a little bit. And if you're going to try to be representative of it and make gobs of money and be, royalty, then you should really love it above all other states. And it should be obvious.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it's not. And it's not. And I think that we all see that now. And I think that now is the time to strike, right? Now is the time to find the good candidates and to start propping them up and to prepare for war. If that's what it's going to take, Charlie Kirk and Scott Pressler are already talking about South Dakota's on the map, right? So how do we get more grassroots people and people that changed the presidential race this year? How do we involve them in what we're trying to do? Guys, come here. Tell us what you did. How can we be that? How can Chris Larson and Bubba Starts go out and sit with South Dakotans and talk to them and talk some sense into them? And where is our candidate to put up against a Thune or a Dusty or Christie's off on her own walk now, but where are the people? And I think you're never going to find those people unless you start getting grouped together, right? Like we got to find these small communities to start just having conversations, right?
Well, that's where it starts. It starts small. I think that's what is intimidating for some people is they think, what am I going to do? I don't even know what the city council does, or I don't know what the school board even is about. It can seem intimidating, but just go to a school board meeting. If you have kids in school, go to a school board meeting, attend it, start paying attention, join a group like Moms for Liberty. There's a local chapter in Sioux Falls in there, and they're keeping an eye on what the schools are doing, trying to keep some of this woke stuff out of there and the porn books. And that's kind of how I got really pulled into the local politics, was a lady that actually runs the Moms for Liberty. And she heard of my podcast or something. And she reached out to me and said, hey, did you know these porn books are in South Dakota schools? And I said, no. And the one thing led to another. And so something like that, anybody could get involved in local, and I don't even like to call it politics because it seems like a dirty word.
It's just your community. It's your community. It's your governance. Get involved in your community, right? Like whatever level that is, wherever you care the most, right? Like a business owner is not going to be interested in the school board if they don't have a kid in the school, right? But they should be involved in some of the other things. Are you a member of the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber?
Oh no, I've quit them twice now, and this last time's for good.
We can talk about that off camera. I'm a new member, but I know that some of the things that they offer are some of these kind of like sit downs with the things, and they kind of dip their toes into local politics. And I've seen a little bit. I'm fairly new, but like for me, I'm not from Sioux Falls. I grew up on the other side of the state in Deadwood. I don't live in Sioux Falls currently. I'm down in Tyndall, right? So I'm way outside of that. Those groups of people are the only access that I have to even other business owners besides coming into your store, right?
Well, some of us have talked about the need for a alternative to the chamber, so a group that actually supports small businesses, because we don't feel that the Chamber of Commerce in Sioux Falls particularly actually represent. We call it the Chamber of Commies, to be honest with you. They're not really focused on. I didn't know one thing. I was a member for like 25 years, and I don't know what they did for me. I mean, they could probably tell you, but the few times I did try to give them feedback, and I tried to promote a buy local campaign. I was trying to get them to partner with me on this. I came up with the buy local campaign about 7 years ago, because of the internet is affecting a lot of retailers. And, once you realize that local retailers like my company and a lot of other people, we employ actual humans that live in Sioux Falls and South Dakota, and we spend our money here. We build houses here. I just built a house, and a lot of contractors made, part of their salary by helping build my house.
And their employees' salaries, right? Like keeping
and if they
local
all
matters.
Just bought their beds from a website and they didn't keep it in Sioux Falls, well, that would kind of suck, right? Like let's keep our money in Sioux Falls if you can. We can't all not buy online all the time 100%, but you can make an effort to do it. And I I spent a lot of time and energy trying to get the governor, the mayor, the chamber of commerce, everybody, the city council to get on board. I made a logo and put it out there and giving it away. And I couldn't, even I joined the South Dakota Retailers Association. I couldn't get them to do it. And it's like, what is your guys' problem? Do you want to listen to a retailer, or do you just want to do your own little thing?
A certain part of that is, ego. Only our ideas are good ideas, and they give you the little pat on the head and they send you on your way. The very condescending, attitude. And
how do you know they did that?
It's just the way these people act. It's the way these people act, man. And that's the thing. And that I wonder that, and the reason that they've been allowed to is because the population base is so small. It's easy for these small communities to get captured, right? And to gatekeep good people and good ideas out of the community. And that's not the function of that. So I think you're right. Maybe we do need an alternative to that, and building our own community and those things. And for me, I'm one who I don't mind getting in there and trying to infiltrate and change things from the inside either, because any organization like that should be there to serve the greater good and not just the greater good of a few.
Well, more power to you. I hope you do that, because you should infiltrate them and take them over.
Well, and you can't do that unless you try, right? Like, you can't get in those rooms unless you get out there. And I've been trying to be more active. I'm not one that's going to sit here behind my microphone and just talk about, oh, well, we need to make a change and we should do this and we should. No. I'm out there too, right? But a big part of what we're doing is getting this information out there, getting just, giving people the courage. And one thing that did it for me was I had a friend of mine, a very conservative family woman, entrepreneur, a South Dakotan, a very proud South Dakotan. And I think I posted something about, I wasn't a heavy Trump guy, but when I realized that that's the only way to save our country right now, like that's the number one thing, I started posting a lot about it, right? And she's like, thank you so much for that, and saying nice things to me about it, because I get so much hate from everyone. And it was just like, okay, yeah, now I'm putting this to 11. Like, if there's people out there that are taking some kind of criticism for that, then I need to be even louder. And we'll just continue to get even louder and team up with other guys that are out there, and gals too, that want to do the right thing for our state, for our country, for our towns. Like, it's just kind of caring about your fellow human is where it starts from.
Yeah, and it'd be good if your generation kind of takes that up, because my generation, the Gen X, I feel like we kind of got skipped over. And you have the rare Gen X. We got some more now with Elon and Vivek. I don't know if he's in there, but it seemed like the boomers just hung on to power and ruled everything for so long that the Gen X kind of got skipped over. And maybe we let it happen. I don't know.
Well, but you were gate kept out of it. All these people just stayed there. They never tried to bring in a new generation, right? You were all of their kids. You were their kids. And they're like, no, we know better than you. You guys stay down there. And they did keep you down. And really, until that generation started to die off, did we even have the conditions and the environment to have what happened happen. And unfortunately, we had to go through COVID. We had to go through them stealing 2020. We had to go through all of this for the whole rigged fucking system to be exposed for what it is, right? And the landslide of an election, the mandate that was given, those things have proven that there are more people awake now than are still sleeping. And the fact that MSNBC and all these left-leaning all of these left-leaning organizations, their profits are tanking, their ratings are dropping through the brink, that the mass awakening is continuing. The veil is continuing to be lifted, right? Now it's a matter of time, and realizing that you have a caged animal trapped in a corner, right? Like, you have cornered this wild animal now that still has all the money, that still has all the power. They got a bunch of crazy people up there that are willing to do crazy things. We're on the verge of World War III. They're launching freaking rockets in Ukraine. This thing is out of control. And if we all don't stand up collectively and say, fucking stop, stop. You are not going to rule over us anymore. Nothing happens. And we can't all, gather in one space to do that. So we have our podcast and we have our writing and our newsletters and our blogs and our websites. And that's how it's happening. And I'm so glad to have a partner out there in you, Chris Larson, doing your thing. And any way that we can amplify your signal, well, that's what we're here to do.
Well, it sounds great because content creation is the key. I think, that's what we need more of in South Dakota is our own media companies. And, there's been a couple of new ones pop up. There's some friends of mine that have one, but the more the merrier, if we can get more voices out. And I think we do need more podcasts that focus on South Dakota.
Well, and I think people in South Dakota didn't realize that there's like 1-2 media companies in South Dakota. I mean, Gray owns all the stations for the most part. All the state is controlled by 2 people, and I bet if you trace the money back, it doesn't take long to get to Soros, right? He bought all the damn radio stations. I know a bunch of radio stations in South Dakota that got bought in that big thing and shut down immediately just so they could all run the same message. It's insane what they've tried to do, what they've been doing for decades and centuries probably, right? But the veil is lifting and independent media is media, right? My little website had 750 visitors yesterday, right? Like,
right on.
If we keep going at this rate, we're going to start to really turn the tide, and we want to be where people get their news. Now, do I want to be that? I'm not really, but if that's where this whole network thing goes, is more independent media and more voices and more shows, I'm fine. I'm here for that too. I'm just interested in where culture, politics, music, where it all comes together, right? And that's the human experience, because it's all of those things tied into one.
Yeah, and at least it's not controlled media, because that's what we felt like. Everything's controlled and massaged to meet, what the regime approved messaging is, and they worked hand in glove with big tech to censor. That's why Elon buying Twitter was
changed the world,
enormous,
saved the world.
They had a monopoly on the information, and if you had an opinion that differed from the state, they would label it, misinformation, and so you were a bad person.
And what's cool now, Chris, is that I was in the cusp of that. I was listening to podcasts. I was dialed into all of that in the moment. What's cool now is that the whole world has woken up to that and go, holy shit. Wow. Yeah, buddy. And it takes time, right? It takes time. And like these people, like I don't hold it against anyone. If you're just waking up now, look, I feel bad for you. You've been trapped and I have dealt with psychotic people in my life. I still do to this day, right? Like I know what it is to deal with a psychopath and to be gaslit and to wake up from that one day and realize it was all BS takes some readjusting of your whole psyche, right? So I think a lot of patience with our friends that have absorbed all of this hate, because that's all it was. It was the opposite of love. It was all hate, whether it was fear or it's all rooted in that base emotion, right? And they've been absorbing that and regurgitating it for, 10 years, some of them, right? We can give them a little bit of grace, but also we need to get to frickin' work. And there's a lot more to do than just, getting Trump elected this November. That was the start. Now let's really, get our boots on and get in there and do the dirty work. Let's get rid of these rhinos to start with right here at our home state in South Dakota. And let's get people in there. Let's get people in there that represent South Dakotans. How about that?
Yeah.
I don't want to see
accountable.
The picture of Thune standing next to Zelensky made me want to vomit. Made me want to vomit. Disgusting. That does not represent South Dakota. How dare you? How dare you?
It's nothing to do with South Dakota. It's a scam.
That's what we're running behind, right? That's who I don't think that it mattered. The candidate has to be good enough, but you run behind that. This man hates you. You know what I mean? Like, he obviously doesn't care about you in South Dakota, and we've allowed him to just sit there until he could have even more power in the Senate to control more people. Why? And no more.
We can change it. We can take this momentum, and you know what? We'll welcome anybody on to join with us.
What's the best way?
Repent.
what's the best way to get there and to join a group or a community, to get with you, your newsletter? Share with us some info that we can go and start finding you and the other Patriots here.
Well, I mean, there's you mentioned the Patriot Ripple Effect. That is a Sioux Falls group that meets that anybody can join. That they're an action group. I mean, that's the thing with them. They're about action, and so they'll put you to work if you want to get involved. If you don't want to get involved with a group, you can just start with, like I said, go to a school board meeting, go to a city council meeting, go to what am I trying to say? County commission meeting. Get involved there, and then there's other groups that you can get involved on Facebook. You can join some groups there, but mainly it's about connecting with people. And when it's time to hit the streets, and which, we just ended that time of door knocking and getting to know people. And that's how a lot of these grassroots candidates got elected, is just going door to door and meeting their neighbors. And that's the best way to do it. That's retail politicking. And you can do that. You can donate money to them. You can support people who are like Leah Anderson, our county auditor, who's in the battles all the time. And all she's trying to do is make sure that our elections are run securely, and she runs into all kinds of resistance. And so she could use support, just showing up at every, Tuesdays they have the county commission meetings where she'll be attacked. And she's just an honest person trying to do her job, that just an average citizen. And so there's a lot you can do. If you want to follow me on my Substack, it's a C's Substack at Heartland SD. That's what mine's called. And so you can read there, and then read a bunch of other ones, and you can write your own stuff, and you can just open yourself up to the idea that this matters. It matters more than your sports ball team, your football team, or your basketball team. That stuff is just a TV show, and the real life is what you grow up in. It's the towns you live in, and as we said during our campaign, the No in November campaign, South Dakota. We don't want it to turn into California. And so you gotta fight to make that happen.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I appreciate your time today. I probably kept you a little longer than you expected, but I think the conversations are important. I hope to keep having you on as kind of our political correspondent, if you will, to keep us in the know anytime something big is happening. And we'll make sure that everybody starts following the Substack and make sure that they're getting involved too.
Right on. Well, I like your fire. I don't know how long you've been doing your podcast, but I think you got a future in it. Sounds like you're passionate, and you just keep having conversations with real people, and I think you'll do really well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chris.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks for listening. Remember to follow the Scene Projects on all your social media channels and get even more content at thesceneprojects.com.